Why do we enjoy stories? The obvious answer to this question was actually presented in the question itself. It's because we enjoy them. Much like baseball in America, stories are a pastime. They can connect a large group of people and make them interested in something based off of a common ground, which would be stories. And of course, with any other question, there's going to be a broad amount of answers as to why we enjoy stories. One could ask 100 people and get 100 different answers. So this compels me to ask the more specific question of what exactly is it about stories that we enjoy? And to give a more specific answer to that, I would say people enjoy stories because they allow them to be transported to new time periods, unfamiliar situations, and into a world that is completely different from their own. Or we enjoy stories because they take a time or situation that we may be familiar with, but they twist them so that we are interested in reading them. The first example that I'm going to talk about is the Encyclopedia of Early Earth by Isabel Greenberg. Now, why would this reader would enjoy this story? A reader would be compelled to enjoy this story because it transports them to a time period that they otherwise would not have gotten to explore. Obviously, living in the 21st century, we are accustomed to the time period that we are living in now. However, through this particular story, we get to see what it was like in early Earth. And with this, we get introduced to a storyteller who is searching to find his soul. And I can compare this to the modern day author. Authors are storytellers. Every single time they pick up a pen, they're telling stories. So I believe the reader would be interested in this story because they get to not only explore a time period that they might not be involved with, but this story also brings in illustrations so that an otherwise boring time period to learn about then becomes interesting. The next example is Redeployment by Phil Kay. The reader in this situation is being brought into the mind of Sergeant Price, who is a Marine who is returning from war. Again, a situation that we might not be familiar with. The reader is being given facts about what it was like for him to come home from war and the struggles that can come with being reintroduced to civilian life, which then brings the reader to ask themselves, why was it so difficult for this man to be reintroduced? Or why is he still feeling this way? The reader enjoys the story because they are being submerged into a situation without actually having to go through it themselves. They are also introduced to a situation that they otherwise would not have been familiar with, because even if somebody serves, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've been to war. So we read war stories to learn about war. In Americana by Adichie, this is my last example. In this story, we are being introduced to our protagonist, Ifemelu, who is an African living in America. And which might not sound so strange, but for the first time, she is being introduced to people who are different from what she's used to, and for the first time, she's being subjected to racism. Through adversity, she begins to learn new things, and while racism might be a familiar situation, dealing with it as an outsider looking in might not be. Therefore, the reader is now being submerged into a new world of kind of being in somebody else's shoes and then asking themselves, why should anybody ever have to go through this? Why don't we change things and make it better so that future generations don't have to deal with this? And I believe that is what Adichie was trying to get at. So in the end, the reader is enjoying this story because they are put in an uncomfortable situation that they might not have been introduced to without actually reading this story. So, in conclusion, we enjoy stories because they take us from the familiar to the unfamiliar. They do this through transporting us to new times, unfamiliar situations, and worlds that we might not be comfortable with. So the next time you pick up a book, be ready to transport yourself into a new world and ask yourself if you are ready to begin the journey.